for folks who say, listen, I have an idea that I want to explore. I'll give you an example. One of my favorite examples from the book and from life is a friend of mine called Luke Holden. Now, Luke Holden, like me, is from the state of Maine, and he was working in finance in a bank. And, he was like, this is not what I want to do for a living, but I need the money. I'm paying off my student loans. On the side, he had grown up fishing for lobster off the coast of Maine.
Bright Ideas episode number 348.
Hey, I know what'll cheer you up.
Welcome to the Bright Ideas Podcast, where we let proven experts help you to find the next bright idea to implement in your business today. And now, here's your host, Trent Dyrsmid.
This is unbelievable.
Its true force has never been fully understood.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Bright Ideas Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Trent Dyrsmid, and my job is to go out and find the most interesting and accomplished entrepreneurs that I can get my hands on, get them to come here onto the show, and then pick their brain and get out all the best actionable golden nuggets that you can implement in your business, ideally starting today. And as always, that is exactly what we're going to do in this episode. Before I welcome my guest today, I've got a couple of very short announcements. Number one, if you aren't already aware, if this is your first time listening to the episode, we also have a thriving Facebook community for e-commerce business founders. Free to join, obviously, and you can go get to it at brightideas.co/Facebook. The other thing that I wanted to let you know is we're starting to experiment with doing live streams with the guests from my show after the episodes air. And if you want to get notifications of those live streams so you can come and you can ask questions and participate on a more interactive basis, easy way to do that is just go to the brightideas.co homepage, become an email subscriber, or join the Facebook group that I mentioned, and we will post notifications in there as well. So in a moment, we'll welcome Patrick to the show. First, a word from our sponsor for today's episode.
Today's episode is brought to you by Flowster. If you run an e-commerce business and are struggling to effectively delegate your highly repetitive work to your team, Flowster's workflow management software and pre-made e-commerce playbooks make hiring, training, and delegating to your team an absolute breeze. Check it out today at flowster.app.
So on the show with me today is Patrick McGinnis, an international venture capitalist and the author of a book called Fear of Missing Out: Practical Decision Making in a World of Overwhelming Choice. Patrick first coined the term FOMO, as well as the related term FOBO, which stands for Fear of a Better Option, way back in 2000 in a 2004 article in the student newspaper of Harvard Business School. FOMO has since been added to the dictionary, and FOBO has become an increasingly popular framework to describe choice paralysis, something I'm sure none of us ever suffer from. He is the host of the hit podcast FOMO Sapiens, which is distributed by Harvard Business Review, and the author of international bestseller, The 10% Entrepreneur: Live Your Startup Dream Without Quitting Your Day Job. He's been featured in the New York Times, Political, the Financial Times, The Guardian, and Inc., and gave a popular 2019 TED Talk on FOBO and decision making. Originally from Maine, he has visited a whopping 103 companies and now calls
Countries.
New York City home. Countries. Did I say something other than countries?
I visited even more companies in my
life.
life.
Companies. So Patrick, thank you so much for coming to make some time to be on the show. It is a pleasure to have you here. So you started your career on Wall Street, and you took what one considered to be the pretty traditional career path, and then you went and departed radically in a different career that involved part-time entrepreneurship. So why did you do that? Because I don't think too many people maybe do that.
Yeah, it was not the plan. The plan was to go to Wall Street and stay on Wall Street and be some finance master of the universe type guy. But the world conspired. Wall Street didn't want me, apparently. It kicked me out because I had like 3 different times that I worked in jobs on Wall Street where like my group was eliminated. And the last one, which was the final straw, was I was working at a division of AIG. and their private equity and venture capital division in 2008 when AIG blew up. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, I have done everything the right way. You know, I got the Harvard MBA, I worked at JP Morgan, like I've done all the stuff you're supposed to do. And like, it all blew up. My stock fell 97% and I just was done. I was like, this is it. You know, if I haven't gotten the message by now, it's time to get out of here. And so that was what brought this decision. But of course, figuring out how to actually build the path beyond that was the challenging part.
So obviously you're not the first person that some experience similar to that has happened to. And a lot of times, you know, afterwards you're left with this feeling of overwhelm and fear and uncertainty. And it's not a happy place to be when that happens to you. And so in your case, you decided to, I think, take a slightly different approach with this 10% entrepreneur approach. Why don't you tell us what is that and what does it mean and how did it play out? And hopefully some folks listening might be able to apply it in their own lives. Yeah.
So basically, you know, I'm sitting there after the financial crisis and I'm watching all my friends out in Silicon Valley. Like, so they didn't deal with the financial crisis. Never went to Silicon Valley. Like, the entrepreneurship just kept booming, and so I was sort of like, wow, I've chosen the wrong path here. Maybe I should be an entrepreneur. But I was afraid of entrepreneurship. The idea of being a full-time entrepreneur, number one, didn't have a good idea. Number two, I'm pretty risk averse. I'm less so now than I used to be, but very risk averse at the time. And I just didn't see myself as a full-time entrepreneur. But I started to notice that some people I knew were becoming investors in companies, like an angel investor, or that they were giving their time, you know, as a startup advisor in exchange for stock in a company. And so I thought, that's interesting. What if I were to integrate entrepreneurship into my life partially, you know, in a part-time manner as a way to create some upside? Because I had started doing like consulting work, and, you know, freelancing is great in terms of paying the bills, but you don't generate wealth because you own none of the things you create. So that's what I started to do. I started to invest 10% of my time and money in all these side ventures. And that was 8 years ago. I now have more than 20 different things that I've done, a very, very, you know, wide range of things that has become quite valuable. And in fact, I have 2 companies that I am a shareholder in that have become unicorns, and I've had a lot of fun with it. And it's just transformed the way I built my career. And so I decided to write a book about this, 5 years ago. And when it came out, a lot of people said to me, Patrick, you know, yes, the financial crisis was terrible, but that will never have another one of those. Like, you don't need to worry. You're so fixated on 2008 and you know, your sort of response to it to do this. It's time to move on. And frankly, unfortunately, this year has just shown that the idea makes sense even more in this pandemic because careers are so unstable. And frankly, I have to tell you, like, one thing that I've learned this year has been a lot of learning for all of us, is my approach works. My 10% is thriving, even though, you know, traditional careers are getting blown up all over the place. So this strategy actually works in good times and in bad.
I like it for a lot of reasons. The thing that, you know, one of the things I don't like about corporate America, there's a lot of things I don't like about corporate America, but one of the things I don't like is it teaches you to be dependent on a single source of income. And then they own you because they know that once they cut that paycheck off, you know, most people don't have any savings in there and deep doo-doo. Your 10% approach to me seems like the risk-averse person's way of creating secondary streams of income for themselves. Would that be a reasonably accurate assessment from someone who hasn't read your book yet?
That's right. And with one important distinction, which is that, you know, there's a lot of these sort of strategies around passive income, and that's great. And, you know, love that. But this is really about more than that. It's about becoming a shareholder in as many things as you can. Either you're running those things as a side business, or you're investing or being an advisor and getting shares in other people's companies. And the idea is that it's all about the ownership. And so, you know, people talk about side hustles and, you know, doing freelancing. That is not what we're talking about here. This is about ownership in things that can grow and that theoretically you could eventually sell. And that's the play. That's really what it's about. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm super risk averse and I do a ton of this.
So let's give an example so that people can really sink their teeth into this. And I have one that comes to mind, and you can tell me, we'll play like 2 entrepreneurs sitting at a table and poking holes in the idea. So everyone who listens to my show knows that I love standard operating procedures, and I love hiring non-U.S. labor because it comes at a fraction of the cost of U.S. labor. I also know, I was actually speaking to Cameron Harold earlier this morning because he's coming on the show in a while. And, one of the things that Cameron said is he said most companies, they don't know about the whole utility of overseas labor. They're just it's not even on their radar screen. They think about hiring somebody and they think about hiring an American because they're in America. So as a way to create one of these 10% opportunities, what if somebody said, hey, I'm really good at documenting processes. It's something that could be done on a part-time basis in my evenings. And then I go to a company and I say, okay, here's my thing. I'm going to help you to document all of your scaling processes. And then I'm going to help you to make sure that you hire non-U.S. labor to use those processes to execute growth at a fraction of the cost of what it would cost you in a traditional way. And in return for that, I want, 10% of your company or something like that. Is that, do you think that would be, is that a great example? And if not, what's wrong with it and what's good about it? Let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great example. And that's kind of the advisor role, which is where you're giving sweat equity, right? And by the way, I share your view. Talent is borderless. And in fact, my team that helps me with all my things is in Latin America because I also need bilingual skills. And so it's very natural, not just because the talent's great, but because there are things that you can get overseas that you may not have as easy access to in the States, right? And so that's a great example. One of the favorite examples that I give is, investing in companies is great. And certainly if you have the capital to do that, it's a wonderful way to do 10%. But when I was getting started, I was very afraid of that still. And so I actually, became an advisor to a company where the CEO needed my advice on all kinds of different strategic issues and with raising capital and stuff like that. I would give him an hour a month and I would meet with the CFO an hour a month. And he gave me a 0.5% of the company that vested over 2 years. And then, our relationship ended. Now we're still friends, but I don't work with them. And that business has gone on to, they just raised millions of dollars of equity. So I can see the trajectory of my equity gaining value over time. And so that's really critical. What you've talked about is exactly right, with the idea, of course, that someday you want to be able to exit that position and not just have 10% of a company and not monetize it.
Yeah. So you'd have to be diligent in your selection process to know that the current ownership wants to exit the company within an appropriate period of time that would be agreeable to you for the time that you're going to invest in doing whatever you're going to do for them.
Yeah, either that or they're going to pay you dividends. I have another company I'm a shareholder in that they do dividends they're not looking to sell, but the idea is you want to, you can't eat stock certificates, right? You have to eat whatever they generate.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. So what other ways, aside from the example that I've given, are there a few more examples that you can share with us for people who are listening who are thinking, I kind of like this idea, but give me some more ideas?
Yeah. So listen, one of the really cool things about 10% entrepreneurship is it can be the gateway drug, as it were, to full-time entrepreneurship. And so for folks who say, listen, I have an idea that I want to explore. I'll give you an example. One of my favorite examples from the book and from life is a friend of mine called Luke Holden. Now, Luke Holden, like me, is from the state of Maine, and he was working in finance in a bank. And, he was like, this is not what I want to do for a living, but I need the money. I'm paying off my student loans. On the side, he had grown up fishing for lobster off the coast of Maine. And so he understood the supply chain of the seafood industry. And he also noticed that in New York City, all the lobster rolls are like $45, right? Which is ridiculous because lobster roll is meant to be eaten, it's not supposed to be some luxury good. And so he said, why don't I create a fast casual concept around lobster rolls? He developed this idea in his free time on the weekends and the evenings. And then he found a business partner to work with him. And so he kept his job and he workshopped this idea and actually launched the business while still working in banking, because he couldn't afford to quit. And it's a great way to try out a business. And then if the business works, you can go full time. And in fact, statistics show, there's a great study that was cited in Adam Grant's book, Originals, that people who try a business out part-time and then go full time are 33% less likely to fail than people who just jump in straight away, because they give themselves the runway to try and experiment see if an idea even works, and even if they like being an entrepreneur before they jump in full time, and then maybe realize my idea doesn't work, I don't like doing this, or whatever that is for you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So this approach versus the full-time entrepreneur approach, I'm going to jump off, build my parachute on the way down. What are some of the pros and cons of 10% versus full-time?
So listen, if you want to be a full-time entrepreneur, I'm not going to stand in your way. I think it's great. And frankly, that for many people is a great way to go. Although you can also be a 10%er when you're a full-time entrepreneur. I call that a 110% entrepreneur because you're using this same approach to diversify yourself, right? Now, the thing that 10% gives you, which you don't get in traditional entrepreneurship, full-time entrepreneurship, is the fact that you are diversified. You are really diversified. And that, and that's the thing. I've had so many of my friends are entrepreneurs, and listen, it's awesome. But like, number one, they are putting this huge bet in this one thing. And like, think about venture capitalists. They don't do that. Venture capitalists have portfolios, and that's why they sleep at night, and they don't gotta sort of like lose their hair at 30, right? So that's a big one. And the other thing is, the life of an entrepreneur is not for everybody. It's stressful. You have higher rates of divorce and depression among entrepreneurs than the general population. So it just may be that you're just not, you don't want, I don't want to be a full-time entrepreneur. Like I can't see myself doing that, but I still want to be entrepreneurial. And so I've been able to create this diversified lifestyle that is much more sustainable for me. And the final thing is, one thing we don't talk about enough is the fact that a lot of entrepreneurs are able to become entrepreneurs because they have money. They have family money or they've made money. And for all the good people out there who just can't afford it, this is a great way to build your own on-ramp without having to have capital to get going.
Yeah, and that is a very real challenge. If you don't have the capital, then you've got to keep working. And then if you're working, you've got family responsibilities and so forth. And it's tough to juggle it all. I honestly don't know if I would have been able to make the transition if I hadn't. In my case, I mean, I jumped off and built the parachute on the way down, and it was scary, and it's not for everyone. I remember being hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, sitting at breakfast with my one angel investor in my first company on Saturday morning, and I didn't have any money to make payroll on Monday. And I already owed him and others like a couple $100,000. And I survived, thankfully, and I ultimately got an exit, but that was not a very fun time.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's the thing. I was just going to say, that's the thing, is that entrepreneurship is glamorized by the media. Like that story has a happy ending, but there are so many stories like yours where the ending isn't happy, and people don't talk about that, right? But that is reality. So listen, if you can handle that, go for it. But me and many people like me, we're not ready.
Yeah. And to be clear, I mean, I don't want to take all the credit if that individual, his name's John, and I still talk to him to this day, 20 years later. If he didn't lend me more money, then my whole life probably would have been different. I probably would have still been an employee because I would have gone bankrupt because I couldn't have made payroll. Maybe I would have figured out some other way to do it. I don't know, though. I only had like 2 days to do it. And it would have been a very unhappy ending. And that would have been a rough go. So thank you, John, if you're listening. I'm sure he isn't, because I don't think he listens to my podcast. But if he does, thank you, John.
What the heck, John?
Yeah, indeed. So what are some of the, people, we hear ideas and we think, oh, that's really great, I want to get started. But then there's obstacles that we don't see. So maybe you can shed some light on that. What are some of the obstacles to getting started with this approach? And then how do you overcome them?
Yeah. So I think the big obstacles, which are completely achievable and to overcome, I'm going to give you 4 today. The first is thinking you don't have time. The second is thinking you don't have enough money. And the third is not thinking carefully about what you're good at and what you like to do, because the combination of the two is where you will find your area of success. So the obstacle is just basically sitting down and doing the work you need to figure out how much time, how much money you can allocate, and then where your skills and your interests lie. And a lot of people struggle with that, and I get that. Like I talk to audiences all the time, very intelligent people who say to me, hey, I'm not really sure like what I'm good at. And I think the thing is we forget, because say you work in a bank, right? And you're an Excel jockey, you're on Excel all day long. Like, you may forget that, like, if you were to walk across the street, nobody knows how to use Excel. It's a very valuable skill set, or make a PowerPoint, but we forget that there's certain things that we do that are super valuable to entrepreneurial ventures. So that's that. The other thing it's a barrier is figuring out how to deal with your day job, in terms of if your employer it doesn't have policies, for example, like what's allowed, what's not allowed, how should you behave, and I have a very strong view on this. I think 10% entrepreneurs are a boon to the workforce, but your employer, you need to figure out how you can operate without violating any rules. So that takes some work as well.
Although in this particular era, when we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic and so many people are working from home, I mean, talk about an opportunity to be able to juggle two things. Because at the end of the day, as long as you're getting your work done for your employer, like all of my employees are remote. Do I check to make sure they're all working 8 hours every day? No, I just expect that they get the work done. And if they get the work done, if they only work 7 hours that day, I don't know. I don't really care about it that much. So I say that only because I think this is an excellent opportunity for somebody who's working from home for their employer to maybe be able to create a little extra time and get up earlier in the morning or whatever, or be more productive, to be able to invest some of that time in your side project.
Totally agree. And I would argue also, first of all, I love that you're confident about it, because if confident business people don't worry about this stuff. They just want their employees to do their work. But the other thing is, it's a real retention tool. If your employees have the flexibility to do what they really want to do in their part-time, and they value their day job so much more, because the day job is the route to flexibility that allows them to explore their passion. So I think that's a really smart way to think about it.
So now that you have hindsight to your benefit, what are some of the things, if you were giving advice to your younger self, your less experienced self, what are some of the pearls of wisdom that you would pass along with respect to taking this approach?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would tell myself, the most important thing is in the beginning, well, there's two things. Number one is, I thought in the beginning somehow this would be like quick. Like, oh, I'll make some angel investments and then like next year I'll be cashing out. No, it actually takes a long time. So I have, as I told you, I have 2 companies in my portfolio that have become really valuable. They're worth more than $1 billion. And I invested in these companies when they were little startups, right? So a lot of money there for me, but we're in like year 8 on both of them. So you got to be patient. This is not sort of something you do for a year or two. This is a lifestyle that you embrace and take everywhere with you. I think that's number one. Number 2 is, I didn't realize how finding the first one is pretty hard, because I think it's kind of like you're so picky that you just want to find the perfect thing. And that's what my whole second book is about, of course. But once you find that first one, it becomes a great conduit to many more. Like, it's much easier to find the other one. So you want to be rigorous, but especially when you're an advisor and you're not putting capital at stake, like, take some risk. There's really, you have no downside to taking risk.
So how about this for an approach to get started? Because I've coached so many new entrepreneurs. I know how stuck they get with, what do I do first? So you have an expertise in something. Why not just start writing about it on your LinkedIn profile, and then making connection requests and making connection requests and making connection requests, and engaging in dialogue with people who you think might be in whatever target market you think you could add value to. And then you've got this ever increasing body of content that demonstrates your expertise. That's an easy action to take. There's no real financial risk to it. You just got to sit at your keyboard and write, and then put some time into it. Would there be a better way, Patrick, that you could suggest for someone who's listening to this thinking, okay, I'm ready to start with a little baby step, but what do I do?
I think that's a great way to go. And in fact, it's sort of like what I always tell people pre-pandemic was like, go to the conference, meet with people, who you're interested with. And so LinkedIn is such a powerful tool, as we all know, and it's a great place to build a repository of knowledge. And it's where people start to recognize that I hate the word thought leadership, but that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, to get to that point though, Trent, the first step is to figure out, like, what do I want? What do I want to be my topic of expertise? And so what I did to figure that out for myself was I wrote a very detailed bio of like everything I'd ever done. And then I looked for the patterns, and I said, where are the areas that I'm different, that are my unique selling propositions? And then what are the things I love? Because it's that combination. What you're good at will make you reputable. What you love will get you out of bed in the morning and get you on that LinkedIn page and get you writing about the topic, right? So it's really that power alley where you want to operate.
And I love earlier that you mentioned that spreadsheet expertise, and I'm calling that out again for the simple reason that I want to remind people listening to this, there's stuff that you're really good at that you totally take for granted because it is so easy for you to do, and that, whatever that is maybe wildly valuable to other people in the marketplace. And because you take it for granted, you might not even be thinking about it. But I would encourage that you take an inventory of the skills and experience that you have, and then just start to ask people, hey, is this skill? Do you have that in your company? Is this good? Is this valuable? And start to use those conversations to start to learn. So you convince yourself that, oh, wow, this thing I'm actually really good at that I totally take for granted is hugely valuable to other people. And that's how you can find your area of expertise that maybe you're going to start writing about. All right. So for people who want to get any of your books, I'm assuming if they just type your name into Amazon, they're going to find your books, right?
They will. And here they are. They're actually sitting right here. This is not planned out, but here they are. They're also audiobooks, of course, and Kindles. And so you can find them, or go to my website, patrickmcginnis.com, which has everything as well.
All right. Patrick, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for making some time. And folks, if this is your first time listening to one of the Bright Ideas podcasts and you enjoyed it, I would love it if you would take a moment on your favorite podcast listening app and subscribe, like, and review the show. And if you would like to get to the show notes for today's episode, because we will put some of the links in there, you can do that by going to brightideas.co/348. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you in another episode soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much for listening to the Bright Ideas Podcast. Check us out on the web at brightideas.co.
All right, show's over. I'm tired.